At 11:53 p.m., a woman stands alone in a private dressing room on the 41st floor of a Manhattan luxury tower, reaching for the zipper of her performance costume, when a voice cuts through the silence like a blade. "Take it off." The man in the shadows claims he owns the building, the room, maybe her future. His name is Jin Cairo, and what he's about to offer will drag her into a world of power, money, and secrets she can't escape. This is the story of Antonia Velez, a dancer drowning in debt who thought she knew the price of survival. She was wrong. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. See? The dressing room smelled like expensive leather and something sharper, vodka maybe, or the kind of cologne men wore when they wanted you to remember them. Antonia Velez stood in front of the mirror, her reflection fractured by the dim lighting, and worked the zipper down the back of her costume. The fabric peeled away from her skin, damp with sweat from 2 hours on stage. Her muscles ached. Her feet throbbed. She didn't care. Pain was the only thing that felt honest anymore. She was reaching for her street clothes when the voice came from behind her. "Take it off." Antonia froze. Her hand hovered over the black dress draped across the chair. She hadn't heard the door open, hadn't heard footsteps, but someone was in the room with her, and the voice, low, controlled, like it was used to being obeyed, didn't belong to anyone she knew. She turned slowly. A man sat in the corner, half swallowed by shadow. Mid-30s, she guessed. Dark suit, no tie, the kind of tailoring that cost more than her rent. His posture was too relaxed for someone who'd just walked into a stranger's dressing room uninvited. He leaned back in the chair like he'd been there for hours, like he owned the place. "Who the hell are you?" Antonia's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Jin Cairo." He didn't stand, didn't offer his hand, just looked at her with the kind of calm that made her skin prickle. "I own the building." She glanced at the door, still closed, no security, no one coming to check on her. The performance had ended 20 minutes ago, and the venue staff were probably halfway through breaking down the stage by now. She was alone with this man, and he knew it. "Congratulations," she said. "Now get out." Cairo didn't move. His eyes, dark, unreadable, stayed on her face. Not her body, not the costume she was still halfway out of, just her eyes, like he was looking for something specific. "You've been working here for 3 months," he said. 5 nights a week, 2 shows per night on weekends. You're good, better than good. The audience remembers you." Antonia's jaw tightened. "You've been watching me." "I've been paying attention." He tilted his head slightly. "There's a difference." She grabbed the black dress and held it in front of her, a flimsy shield. Her heart was hammering now, but she kept her expression flat. 14 months of fighting creditors, dodging calls, and performing through exhaustion had taught her how to fake composure. "If this is some kind of proposition, it's a job offer." That stopped her. Cairo leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and for the first time she saw him clearly. Sharp features, a scar along his jawline, faint but deliberate, the kind of face that looked like it had earned every year it carried. "I'm launching a new project in New York, high-end, exclusive. I need someone who understands how to turn a space into an experience. You do that every time you step on stage. You don't know anything about me. I know you're drowning in $380,000 of medical debt. I know you work 6 other gigs on top of this one. I know you haven't missed a payment in 14 months, but you're about 3 weeks away from defaulting." His voice didn't change. No sympathy, no cruelty, just facts. "I know you're running out of options." Antonia felt the air leave her lungs. The dress slipped from her fingers, pooling at her feet. "How do you—" "I do my research." Cairo stood, and the room seemed to shrink. He wasn't tall, maybe 5'10", but he carried himself like someone who'd never had to prove anything. "I'm offering you a position as creative director for the New York launch. 6-month contract, full salary, benefits, and a signing bonus that'll cover your first payment." She stared at him. "You're insane." "I'm efficient." He pulled a card from his pocket and set it on the counter beside the mirror. Matte black, no logo, just a phone number embossed in silver. "You have 48 hours to decide. After that, the offer disappears." "I don't even know what you're launching." "A members-only experience. Art, performance, hospitality, curated for people who don't wait in lines. He moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the handle. You'll have complete creative control. Budget's not an issue. I just need someone who can make people feel something they can't find anywhere else. Antonia's throat tightened. Why me? Cairo looked back at her, and for a split second, something flickered in his expression, something almost human. Because you're not performing anymore. You're surviving, and survival looks different than ambition. He opened the door. I need someone who remembers what it's like to want something badly enough to bleed for it. Then he was gone. Antonia stood there, half-dressed, staring at the black card like it might explode. Her hands were shaking. She hated that. Hated that he'd gotten under her skin. Hated that he was right about the debt, the exhaustion, the fact that she was one missed payment away from losing everything. She picked up the card. The number stared back at her. Antonia didn't sleep that night. She sat in her studio apartment, a fourth-floor walk-up in Astoria with a radiator that clanked like a dying animal, and ran the numbers again. The medical bills were stacked on her kitchen table, color-coded by due date. Red meant overdue. Yellow meant approaching. Green meant paid. There was a lot of red. Her father had died 16 months ago. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4 by the time they caught it. The treatments had been brutal and expensive, and insurance had covered maybe 40%. The rest landed on her. She'd signed the paperwork without reading it because what else was she supposed to do? Let him die in a hallway? Now she was paying for it, literally. She pulled out her phone and opened the calculator app for the 100th time. Even with the 6 jobs she was juggling, performing, teaching dance classes, bartending, doing voiceover work for corporate videos, cleaning apartments on weekends, and occasionally selling her artwork online, she was barely keeping her head above water. The signing bonus Cairo mentioned would buy her 2 months, maybe 3 if she was careful. But taking money from a stranger who knew too much about her life felt like stepping into quicksand. She looked at the black card again. Then she made the call. Cairo answered on the second ring. No greeting, just, I'm listening. Antonia's stomach twisted. I want to meet, in public, somewhere with witnesses. A pause. Then, faintly, she thought she heard him smile. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Bryant Park. There's a coffee cart near the fountain. How will I know it's you? You'll know. He hung up. Antonia stared at her phone. What the hell was she doing? Moles. Bryant Park was crowded. Tourists clustered around the fountain, couples sprawled on the lawn, office workers grabbed lunch from food trucks. Antonia sat on a bench near the coffee cart, wearing jeans and a leather jacket, her hair pulled back in a tight bun. She'd arrived 15 minutes early, scanning the crowd for anyone who looked like they didn't belong. At exactly 2 p.m., Cairo appeared. He wasn't alone. A woman walked beside him, late 20s, sharply dressed, carrying a leather portfolio. She had the kind of face that didn't smile unless it was strategic. Cairo nodded toward Antonia, and the woman peeled off, disappearing into the crowd. He sat down beside her without asking. You came, he said. I'm an idiot. You're pragmatic. He gestured toward the coffee cart. Want something? Answers. Cairo leaned back, stretching his arm across the bench. He looked different in daylight, less like a phantom, more like a man who'd learned how to wear power like a second skin. Ask. Why me? Specifically. There are 1,000 creatives in this city who'd kill for this job. Most of them want to be seen, Cairo said. You just want to survive. That makes you dangerous. Dangerous how? You won't waste my time trying to prove you're clever. You'll just do the work. He pulled a slim folder from his coat and handed it to her. Contract? Read it. Take it to a lawyer if you want. Everything's standard except the NDA. Antonia opened the folder. The first page listed her salary, 6 figures, more than she'd made in the last 3 years combined. The signing bonus was enough to wipe out 4 months of debt payments. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the rest. Creative director, 6-month probation period, full benefits, performance-based extensions. It looked legitimate, too legitimate. What's the catch? She asked. No catch, just expectations. Cairo's voice dropped slightly. I don't tolerate failure. I don't accept excuses. If you take this job, you deliver. If you can't, you're gone. And the NDA? Everything you see, hear, or learn about my business stays confidential. Forever. Even after the contract ends. Antonia closed the folder. You're asking me to trust you. I'm asking you to make a choice. Caro stood. Sign the contract, and you start Monday. Decline, and we never speak again. He pulled out his phone, checked something, then looked down at her. You have until midnight tonight. That's not 48 hours. I changed my mind. He started walking, then paused. One more thing. If you're looking for safety, don't take this job. If you're looking for control, do. Then he was gone again, swallowed by the crowd. Antonia sat there, gripping the folder, feeling like the ground had just shifted beneath her. Each. She signed the contract at 11:47 p.m., took a photo of it with her phone, sent it to the email address listed on the card, and then sat in her apartment waiting for the fear to hit. It didn't. Instead, she felt something she hadn't felt in 14 months. Relief. Chalmch. Monday morning, Antonia walked into the Cairo Holdings offices on the 60th floor of a midtown skyscraper. The woman from Bryant Park, whose name turned out to be Claire, met her at reception and handed her a security badge, a company phone, and a tablet loaded with project files. Your office is this way, Claire said, leading her down a hallway lined with floor-to-ceiling windows. The city sprawled below them, endless and indifferent. Her office was corner-positioned, twice the size of her apartment, with a view that made her chest tighten. A sleek desk, 2 monitors, a sitting area with a couch that probably cost more than her rent. Mr. Cairo will brief you at 10, Claire said. The project files are on your tablet. Budget allocations, vendor contacts, timelines, everything you need to start. Antonia set her bag down, trying not to look overwhelmed. Where's his office? Claire's expression didn't change. He doesn't keep one. He moves. Moves? You'll understand soon enough. Claire left, closing the door behind her. Antonia sat down at the desk, opened the tablet, and started reading. The project was called Elevation, a members-only experience launching in 6 months, designed to blend art installations, live performance, fine dining, and immersive environments into a seamless journey. The target demographic was ultra-high net worth individuals, people who could afford to pay $100,000 annually for access to something no one else had. The budget was staggering, $20 million for the build-out alone. Antonia's role was to design the creative vision, the flow, the atmosphere, the emotional arc guests would experience from the moment they entered to the moment they left. She'd have full authority over artists, performers, designers, and vendors. Cairo's only directive was simple: make them feel like they've arrived somewhere they were always meant to be. She read the same line 3 times. Then her door opened. Cairo walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee. He set one on her desk without asking if she wanted it. Thoughts? Antonia looked up. This is insane. That's not a thought. That's a reaction. I don't know if I can do this. You can. He sat down across from her, completely at ease. You already know how to create an experience. You've been doing it every time you perform. The only difference now is scale. Scale and $20 million. Money's just a tool. You'll learn how to use it. He leaned forward slightly. First instinct. What does elevation feel like? Antonia hesitated. Her brain was screaming at her to play it safe, give him something corporate and polished. But Cairo's eyes were steady, waiting, and she realized he wasn't asking for safety. He was asking for truth. It feels like crossing a threshold, she said slowly, like stepping out of who you were and into who you've been trying to become. It's not just luxury, it's transformation. Cairo went still, then he smiled, barely, just a flicker at the corner of his mouth. Good. Start there. He stood, drained his coffee in one gulp, and headed for the door. Wait, Antonia called. What do you want me to do first? Surprise me. And then he was gone. Mochab. The first 2 weeks blurred together. Antonia threw herself into the work with the kind of intensity she usually reserved for performances. She interviewed artists, scouted locations, studied luxury hospitality brands, and started sketching out the framework for Elevation's journey. She barely slept, barely ate. The debt was still there, lurking in the back of her mind, But for the first time in over a year, she wasn't suffocating under it. She was building something. Caro moved through the office like a ghost. She'd see him in meetings, walking the halls, occasionally sitting in the corner of the design studio while she worked. He never interrupted, never micromanaged, just watched, absorbed, and occasionally asked questions that made her rethink everything. "Why does the entryway feel apologetic?" he asked one afternoon, standing behind her while she reviewed mock-ups. Antonia frowned. "It doesn't." "It does. You're easing them in. Don't. Hit them immediately." She stared at the design. He was right. She'd softened the entry to make it welcoming, but welcoming wasn't the point. Arrival was. She scrapped the design and started over. Cairo didn't praise her. He just nodded and walked away. That became their rhythm. He'd appear, ask a single devastating question, and vanish before she could argue. It was infuriating. It was also effective. Every time he pushed, the work got sharper. And then, 3 weeks in, he asked her to travel. "Seoul," Cairo said, dropping a plane ticket on her desk. "We leave Thursday." Antonia looked up from her screen. "Why?" "Research. There's a venue I want you to see. It'll help you understand what elevation should feel like. I don't have a passport that's already handled." He pulled a slim envelope from his jacket and tossed it beside the ticket. Her passport. Updated, expedited, stamped. She stared at it. "How did you—" "I told you. I do my research." He checked his watch. "Pack light. We're only there for 3 days." "I can't just leave. I have vendor meetings, design reviews. Claire will handle it." His tone left no room for negotiation. "This isn't optional, Antonia. If you're going to build something that changes people, you need to see what that looks like." She wanted to argue, wanted to push back. But the truth was, she was curious. Cairo didn't waste time. If he thought this was important, it probably was. "Fine," she said, "but I'm charging the flight to the company card." He almost smiled. Already did. They flew business class. Antonia had never flown business class in her life. The seat reclined into a bed. There was real silverware. The flight attendant called her Ms. Valez and offered her champagne before takeoff. Cairo sat across the aisle, reading something on his tablet, completely unbothered by the luxury. Antonia tried to sleep and failed. Her mind kept spinning, cataloging details, filing away observations, wondering what the hell she'd gotten herself into. Somewhere over the Pacific, Cairo looked up. "You're overthinking." "I'm thinking an appropriate amount." "No, you're assuming there's a trap." He set the tablet aside. "There isn't. I don't operate that way." "Everyone operates that way." "Not me." His voice was calm, final. "I don't lie. I don't manipulate. If I want something from you, I'll ask directly." Antonia studied him. "Then what do you want from me?" "Your best work." He held her gaze. "That's it. That's the entire agenda." She didn't believe him, but she wanted to. Seoul hit her like a fever dream. The city was a collision of old and new, ancient temples pressed against glass skyscrapers, street markets bleeding into luxury districts. Cairo moved through it like he'd been born there, navigating crowds and subway stations with the ease of someone who'd memorized the map. Their hotel was in Gangnam, sleek and minimalist, all black marble and soft lighting. Antonia's room had a view of the Han River. She stood at the window, jet-lagged and disoriented, watching the lights ripple across the water. Her phone buzzed. Cairo. "Lobby, 20 minutes." She changed into something presentable and met him downstairs. He was wearing a black coat, hands in his pockets, looking like he belonged in a noir film. "Hungry?" "Starving." "Good." He took her to a restaurant buried 3 floors underground, accessible only through an unmarked door in an alley. Inside, it was all exposed brick and candlelight, the kind of place that didn't have menus because the chef decided what you ate. They sat across from each other, and for the first time since she'd met him, Cairo seemed relaxed. Not soft, never soft, but present in a way he wasn't in New York. The food arrived in waves, small, perfect, overwhelming. Antonia stopped trying to identify ingredients and just ate. "You don't talk much about yourself," Cairo said, pouring her tea. "Neither do you." "I asked first." She set down her chopsticks. "What do you want to know?" "Why dance?" The question caught her off guard. It was the only thing I was good at. That's not true. How would you know? Because people who are only good at one thing don't survive what you've survived. He leaned back, watching her. Try again. Antonia felt something crack open in her chest. It was the only thing that felt like mine. My father wanted me to be a doctor. My mother wanted me to get married. Dance was the one place where no one could tell me who to be. Cairo nodded slowly. And now? Now I don't dance anymore. I perform. What's the difference? Dance is for you. Performance is for them. His expression shifted, just barely, but she saw it. Recognition, understanding. You're angry. I'm tired. Same thing. She laughed bitterly. You don't know me well enough to say that. I know you better than you think. He poured himself more tea. You're angry because you're good at something that doesn't pay. You're tired because you've been fighting alone for 14 months. And you're here because you're finally letting someone help you, and it terrifies you. Antonia's throat tightened. Stop. Why? Because you don't get to do that. Do what? See me. Cairo went quiet. The silence stretched, heavy and electric. Then he leaned forward, elbows on the table, close enough that she could see the scar on his jaw clearly. I'm not your enemy, Antonia. Then what are you? He didn't answer. The candle between them flickered, and for the first time since she'd met him, Antonia realized she didn't want him to. The venue he wanted her to see was in Itaewon, a converted warehouse that had been transformed into an immersive art installation. No signs, no branding, just a door. Inside, the space unfolded like a dream. Each room bled into the next, light, sound, texture, scent, all calibrated to pull you deeper. Antonia moved through it slowly, absorbing everything. The way shadows guided you forward, the way silence made you pay attention, the way the final room, an empty white space with a single mirror, forced you to confront yourself. She stood in front of the mirror for a long time. Caro stood behind her, just outside the frame. What do you see? Someone who's pretending she has control. Good. Now build that into elevation. She turned to face him. You brought me here to break me down. I brought you here to show you what's possible when you stop holding back. He stepped closer, and the air between them tightened. You're afraid of what you could build if you stopped performing and started creating again. Antonia's pulse hammered. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? She wanted to walk away, wanted to shut him down, but he was right, and they both knew it. I hate you, she said quietly. No, you don't. I should. Cairo's mouth curved, barely. Probably. The moment hung between them, fragile and dangerous. Then Antonia's phone rang. She pulled it out, frowning at the unfamiliar number. Korean area code. Hello? A woman's voice. Accented but clear. Ms. Valez? Yes? This is Detective Han Ji-soo, Seoul Metropolitan Police. I need to speak with you. It's about Jin Cairo. Antonia's blood went cold. She looked up at Cairo. His expression hadn't changed, but something in his eyes had. A flicker of recognition. He knew. I'm listening, Antonia said slowly. Not over the phone. Meet me tomorrow. 10 a.m., Gangnam Police Station. Come alone. The line went dead. Antonia lowered the phone, her hand shaking. Cairo stood perfectly still. What did they say? They want to talk to me. About you. His jaw tightened. And? They told me to come alone. For the first time since she'd met him, Jin Cairo looked like a man who didn't have all the answers. And Antonia realized she'd just stepped into something far more dangerous than debt. Antonia didn't sleep. She lay in the hotel room, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of Seoul traffic 40 floors below. The detective's voice kept looping in her head, calm, professional, dangerous. Come alone. Like she was already complicit in something she didn't understand. At 3 a.m., she gave up on sleep and sat by the window, watching the city lights blur through the glass. Her phone sat on the table beside her, dark and silent. She'd turned it off after the call, afraid of what might come through next. Cairo hadn't said a word after the museum. He'd walked her back to the hotel, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. At the elevator, he'd stopped and looked at her, really looked at her, and said, "Whatever they tell you tomorrow, remember this: I don't lie." Then he'd disappeared into his room, and she'd been alone with the wreckage of her certainty. Now, with dawn creeping across the horizon, Antonia felt the weight of the choice pressing down on her chest. She could go to the police station, hear what they had to say, maybe walk away from Cairo, from Elevation, from all of it, or she could ignore the call, pretend it never happened, keep building the life she'd barely started to believe in. Both options felt like stepping off a cliff. She turned her phone back on. 17 missed calls, all from the same number, all from Cairo. She stared at the screen, her stomach twisting. Then she called him back. He answered before the first ring finished. "Where are you?" "My room." "Stay there." The line went dead. 3 minutes later, someone knocked on her door. Antonia opened it to find Cairo standing in the hallway, wearing the same clothes from yesterday, looking like he hadn't slept either. His jaw was tight, his eyes sharp and awake in a way that made her pulse spike. "We need to talk," he said. "No kidding." He stepped inside without asking, closed the door behind him, and leaned against it like he was blocking her exit. "What exactly did the detective say?" "That she needed to talk to me. About you. Alone." Antonia crossed her arms. "What the hell is going on?" "I don't know yet." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have." Cairo ran a hand through his hair, the first time she'd seen him do anything that looked remotely like stress. "The Seoul police don't call foreign nationals unless they're already building a case. If they contacted you, it means they think you're involved in something." "Involved in what?" "I don't know." "Stop saying that." Her voice cracked, louder than she intended. "You know everything. You researched my entire life before we even met. You don't just not know why the police are calling me." Cairo's expression hardened. "I know how to run a business. I know how to identify talent. I know how to build systems that last. What I don't know is why a detective from the Seoul Metropolitan Police thinks you're worth contacting." He pushed off the door, closing the distance between them. "But I can guess." "Then guess." "They think you're leverage." The word landed like a fist. Antonia took a step back. "What?" "You work for me. You're in Seoul with me. You have access to my company, my files, my network." Cairo's voice was low, controlled, but she could hear the edge beneath it. "If they want information, they'll use you to get it." "Information about what?" "About how I move money, how I structure deals, who I work with." He met her eyes, unflinching. "They think I'm laundering." Antonia's breath caught. "Are you?" "No." "How do I know that's true?" "Because I'm telling you." Cairo didn't blink. "I don't lie, Antonia. I told you that already." "Everyone lies." "Not to you, not about this." He stepped closer, and she could smell the faint trace of cologne, coffee, exhaustion. "If I were running illegal money, I wouldn't bring you into it. I wouldn't make you creative director of a project that's entirely legitimate. And I sure as hell wouldn't have flown you to Seoul, where foreign law enforcement could get to you." Antonia wanted to believe him, wanted it so badly her chest ached, but belief was a luxury she couldn't afford. "Then why are they calling me?" "Because someone told them to." "Who?" "I don't know yet." Cairo pulled out his phone, scrolled through something, then handed it to her. "But I'm going to find out." On the screen was an email thread. Legal correspondences, audits, financial reports, all clean, all legitimate. Cairo Holdings had been investigated twice in the last 5 years, once in New York, once in Singapore. Both times, the audits had come back spotless. "You've been investigated before?" Antonia said slowly. "3 times. I run a private equity firm that moves hundreds of millions of dollars across borders. Of course I've been investigated." He took the phone back. "And every time they find nothing, because there's nothing to find." "Then why now? Why me?" "That's what we're going to figure out." He checked his watch. "You have 6 hours before that meeting. I need you to decide if you're going." Antonia stared at him. "You want me to go?" "I want you to make the choice that lets you sleep at night." His voice softened, just barely. "If you think I'm dirty, go to the station, tell them everything, walk away from Elevation, from me, from all of it. I won't stop you." "And if I don't go?" "Then we handle this together." Cairo's eyes locked on hers. But once you make that choice, there's no going back. You're either in or you're out. I don't do halfway. Antonia's pulse hammered in her ears. Every instinct she had was screaming at her to run, to get on the next flight back to New York, to walk away before this turned into something she couldn't escape. But another part of her, the part that had signed the contract, that had thrown herself into elevation, that had started to believe she could build something that mattered, that part was louder. I need time, she said. You have until 9:30. Cairo moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I'm sorry you got dragged into this. Are you? He looked back at her, and for the first time she saw something unguarded in his expression. Yeah, I am. Then he left. Antonia stood alone in the hotel room, her reflection staring back at her from the window, and tried to figure out who the hell she was becoming. At 8 a.m., she went down to the hotel restaurant and ordered coffee she didn't drink. The place was half empty. A few business travelers, a couple on their honeymoon, a man in the corner reading a newspaper in Korean. Antonia sat by the window watching the city wake up and tried to think. The smart choice was obvious. Go to the police. Tell them everything. Protect yourself. But what was everything? She didn't know anything incriminating. Didn't have access to Cairo's financials beyond the project budget. Didn't know who he met with, where his money came from, or what deals he was running outside of Elevation. All she had was a contract, a salary, and a man who claimed he didn't lie. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Ms. Valez, this is Detective Han. I understand you may be conflicted about our meeting. Please know that you are not in trouble. We simply need your help. 10 a.m. Don't be late. Antonia read it 3 times, then she deleted it. She wasn't going. At 9:45, she knocked on Cairo's door. He opened it immediately, already dressed, already alert. You decided. I'm not going to the police. Something shifted in his expression. Relief, maybe, or vindication. Why? Because I don't know anything worth telling them. And because if you were dirty, you wouldn't have shown me those audits. She stepped inside his room, which looked identical to hers except for the laptop open on the desk, multiple tabs glowing on the screen. But I need answers, real ones, starting with who the hell would tell the Seoul police to investigate you. Cairo closed the door. I have a list. How long? 3 names, all competitors, all with enough resources to make my life difficult. He gestured toward the laptop. I've been digging since you called me back. 2 of them have ties to Korean enforcement. One of them just lost a major contract to me in Singapore. Which one? Marcus Lorne, British, runs a development firm out of Hong Kong. We've been circling the same deals for years. Cairo pulled up a photo. A man in his 50s, silver hair, expensive suit, the kind of face that looked good in boardrooms. He plays dirty, anonymous tips, planted stories, regulatory complaints that go nowhere but cost time and money. Antonia studied the photo. You think he tipped off the Seoul police? I think he tipped off someone who tipped off the Seoul police. Cairo closed the laptop. The question is, why now? Why you? Because I'm new. I'm vulnerable. Antonia sat down on the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted. If they flip me, they get access to everything. Except there's nothing to access. Cairo sat beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat coming off him. Which means this is a fishing expedition. They're hoping you panic and give them something, anything, they can use to justify a deeper investigation. So what do? We go dark. We finish the trip. We fly back to New York. We don't give them a reason to keep looking. He turned to face her. And you stay away from that police station. Antonia met his eyes. What if they come after me anyway? Then I protect you. How? However I have to. The certainty in his voice should have scared her. Instead, it steadied something inside her chest. I'm trusting you, she said quietly. I know. Don't make me regret it. Cairo's mouth curved, barely. I'll try. They spent the rest of the day moving. Cairo didn't explain where they were going, just told her to pack light and follow him. They checked out of the hotel through a side entrance, took a cab to a different district, and booked a room in a smaller place near Hongdae, a neighborhood full of art students, dive bars, and narrow streets where tourists got lost. The new hotel was a fraction of the size. No marble, no river views, just clean sheets and a door that locked. Antonia dropped her bag on the bed. You think they're watching the other hotel? I think they're watching everything. Cairo pulled the curtains closed. But this buys us time. Time for what? For you to finish what you came here to do. He pulled out his phone, sent a quick text, then pocketed it. There's another venue I want you to see. Tonight. It'll help with elevation. Antonia almost laughed. You're seriously still thinking about the project? I'm always thinking about the project. His voice was steady, focused. The police can investigate all they want. They won't find anything because there's nothing to find. In the meantime, we do the work. You're insane. I'm efficient. He grabbed his coat. Meet me downstairs in an hour. Wear something you can move in. Where are we going? You'll see. Zapped. The venue was in Itaewon, tucked behind a club that didn't open until midnight. Cairo led her down an alley, through an unmarked door, and into a space that felt like it existed outside of time. It was a dance studio. Not the polished kind with mirrors and bars. This was raw, concrete floors, exposed pipes, a sound system cobbled together from mismatched speakers. A dozen people moved through the space, bodies flowing in and out of rhythm. No choreography, just instinct. Antonia stopped in the doorway, her breath catching. Cairo stood beside her, watching. This is what I want elevation to feel like. Chaos? Freedom. He gestured toward the dancers. They're not performing. They're not trying to impress anyone. They're just present. Antonia watched a woman spin across the floor, arms loose, face unguarded. She looked like she'd forgotten the world existed. You can't bottle that. No. But you can create the conditions for it. Cairo turned to her. That's what I hired you for. Not to choreograph something perfect, to build a space where people remember what it feels like to let go. Something cracked open in Antonia's chest. I don't know if I can do that. Why not? Because I haven't let go in years. Cairo's expression softened. Then maybe it's time to start. He stepped into the studio, and after a moment, Antonia followed. The music was low and heavy, all bass and percussion. The dancers moved around them, barely noticing their presence. Cairo stopped in the center of the room, hands in his pockets, just watching. Antonia stood beside him, feeling the rhythm sink into her bones. When's the last time you danced for yourself? Cairo asked. I told you, I don't dance anymore. You're dancing right now. She realized her hips were swaying, just slightly, just enough. Stop analyzing, Cairo said. Just move. Antonia closed her eyes. The music swelled, and for the first time in 14 months, she let herself feel it. Her body remembered what her mind had tried to forget, the way rhythm lived in her ribs, the way movement could silence thought. She wasn't performing, wasn't trying to be good. She was just there. When she opened her eyes, Cairo was watching her. Not like a boss, not like a stranger, like someone who understood. That's what I want, he said quietly. That exact feeling, in every room, for every person who walks through. Antonia's throat tightened. You're asking me to give them something I don't have anymore. No. I'm asking you to remember you still do. The space between them felt electric. Then Cairo's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, read something, and his expression went cold. We need to leave. What happened? Detective Han just showed up at the first hotel. He grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the exit. She's asking for you. Right. They didn't go back to the second hotel. Cairo made a call, and within 20 minutes, a car picked them up and drove them to a private residence in Gangnam, a penthouse apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows and security that looked military-grade. Whose place is this? Antonia asked as they stepped inside. Mine. She turned to stare at him. You own property in Seoul? I own property in 6 cities. Cairo locked the door behind them, engaged the deadbolt, and moved through the apartment like he'd lived there for years. This is the safest place in the city. No one knows about it except my lawyer and my security team. Antonia walked to the window. The city sprawled below them, endless and indifferent. How long are we staying here? Until our flight tomorrow night. And if the detective finds us? She won't. Caro pulled out his laptop, set it up on the dining table, and started typing. I'm moving our flight up. We leave tomorrow at noon instead of evening. Different airline, different route. You're running. I'm being strategic. He didn't look up. There's a difference. Antonia sat down across from him. What happens when we get back to New York? We finish Elevation. We launch in 6 months. We prove that everything I built is legitimate. He finally looked at her. And you decide if you still want to be part of it. You think I'm going to bail? I think you're smart enough to consider it. Antonia leaned back, studying him. Why do you care if I stay? Because you're good at this. Better than you know. Cairo closed the laptop. And because I don't want to train someone else. That's it? I'm convenient? You're necessary. His voice was quiet, but there was weight behind it. I don't say that lightly. Antonia's pulse kicked up. What does that mean? It means I need you to finish what we started. Cairo stood, moved to the window, and looked out at the city. And it means I'm asking you to trust me even when everything tells you not to. That's a lot to ask. I know. She joined him at the window. Side by side, their reflections overlapped in the glass. What if I can't? Then we're both screwed. Antonia almost smiled. You're terrible at reassurance. I'm excellent at honesty. They stood there in silence, the city humming below, and Antonia felt the full weight of the choice she'd already made. She wasn't leaving. Not yet. Back. That night, she couldn't sleep again. She lay on the guest bed in Cairo's penthouse, staring at the ceiling, listening to him move through the apartment. He didn't sleep either. She could hear him working, keyboard clicks, low phone calls in a language she didn't recognize, the occasional clink of glass against marble. At 2 a.m., she gave up and walked into the main room. Cairo sat at the dining table, surrounded by documents, his face lit by the glow of the laptop. He looked up when she entered. Can't sleep? Neither can you. I don't sleep much. He gestured to the chair across from him. Sit. She did. For a while they didn't speak. Cairo worked. Antonia watched the city lights shift and shimmer through the windows. Then she said, Tell me something true. Cairo stopped typing. About what? About you. About why you do this. She leaned forward. You have money. You have power. You could retire tomorrow and live like a king for the rest of your life. So why keep building? Cairo was quiet for a long time. Then he said, Because stopping feels like dying. The honesty in his voice hit her like a punch. I grew up with nothing, he continued. No family, no safety net, just survival. He closed the laptop, giving her his full attention. Everything I have, I built. Every deal, every property, every relationship. And the moment I stop building, the moment I let myself rest, it all starts to slip away. That's not true. It is for me. His eyes were dark, steady. I don't know how to exist without momentum, without the next project, without proving that I'm still worth something. Antonia felt something crack open in her chest. That sounds exhausting. It is. Then why not stop? Because I don't know who I am if I'm not moving forward. Cairo leaned back, rubbing his face. You asked me why I hired you. The real reason is because you understand that. You're the same way. You don't stop. You don't quit, even when it's killing you. Antonia's throat tightened. That's not a compliment. It's an observation. They sat in silence, the truth hanging between them. Then Antonia said, I believe you. Cairo looked up. About what? About the money. About elevation. About all of it. She met his eyes. I don't know why, but I do. Something shifted in his expression. Relief, maybe, or something deeper. Thank you, he said quietly. Antonia nodded. Don't make me regret it. I won't. Chick. They flew back to New York the next afternoon. Business class again, champagne again. But this time Antonia didn't feel like an imposter. She felt like someone who'd survived something. Cairo sat across the aisle, reading, calm as ever. Somewhere over the Pacific, Antonia's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. She opened it. No text. Just a photo. It took her a moment to process what she was seeing. It was her. And Cairo. Standing at the window of his Seoul penthouse, taken from outside, from another building, someone had been watching them. Her blood went cold. She looked up at Cairo. He was already watching her, his expression unreadable. "Show me," he said. She handed him the phone. He stared at the photo for a long time. Then he said, "We have a problem." "No kidding." Cairo handed the phone back. "When we land, I need you to do something for me." "What?" "Trust me completely. No questions, no hesitation." His voice was low, urgent. "Can you do that?" Antonia's pulse hammered. "Depends on what you're asking." "I'm asking you to let me protect you." "From who?" "From whoever's been watching us since Seoul." Cairo leaned closer. "This isn't a police investigation anymore. This is something else." "What does that mean?" "It means someone wants me distracted, vulnerable, and they're using you to do it." His eyes locked on hers. "So I need to know right now, are you in or are you out?" Antonia looked at the photo again, at the proof that someone had been tracking them, watching them, waiting. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she didn't. "I'm in," she said. Cairo nodded once. "Good, because when we land, everything changes." The plane descended toward JFK, and Antonia stared out the window, watching New York rise up to meet them. She had no idea what she'd just agreed to, but she knew there was no going back. The car was waiting when they landed. Not a taxi, not an Uber. A black SUV with tinted windows and a driver who didn't speak, didn't smile, just opened the door and waited for them to get in. Antonia climbed into the back seat, her carry-on clutched against her chest, and watched Cairo slide in beside her. The door closed with a sound like a vault ceiling. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere safe." Cairo pulled out his phone, typed something, then powered it down completely. "Give me yours." "What?" "Your phone. Give it to me." Antonia hesitated, then handed it over. Cairo removed the SIM card, snapped it in half, and dropped both pieces into a small metal case he pulled from his jacket. Then he handed her a different phone, brand new, still in the box. "Use this from now on," he said. "The number's clean. Only 3 people have it. Me, Claire, and my head of security." Antonia stared at the phone. "You're serious?" "Completely." "Who are we hiding from?" "I don't know yet." Cairo's jaw was tight, his eyes scanning the streets as they moved through Queens. But whoever sent that photo knew exactly where we were, which means they either followed us to Seoul or they have access to information they shouldn't. Like what? Flight manifests, hotel reservations, credit card transactions. He finally looked at her. Everything that leaves a digital trail. Antonia's stomach twisted. "So what do we do?" "We go dark. We work offline. We finish elevation without giving anyone a reason to look closer." The SUV turned onto the Queensboro Bridge, Manhattan rising ahead of them like a wall of light. "And we figure out who's watching before they figure out what we're building." "You think this is about elevation?" "I think elevation is worth enough money that people will do ugly things to control it." Cairo's voice was cold, factual. "The project's tied to my reputation. If someone can prove I'm corrupt, the whole thing collapses. Investors pull out. Vendors walk. The launch dies. And whoever's behind this gets what? A competitor eliminated, or leverage to force me into a deal I don't want." He leaned back against the seat, exhaustion finally showing in the lines around his eyes. "Either way, they win if we let them rattle us." Antonia looked down at the phone in her hands. "I didn't sign up for this." "I know. I signed up to design an experience, not to get stalked by whoever the hell is trying to destroy you." "I know." Cairo's voice softened, just barely. "And if you want out, I'll arrange it. New identity, relocation expenses, a reference that'll get you hired anywhere in the world. You walk away clean." Antonia stared at him. "You'd do that?" "To keep you safe? Yes." Something in his tone made her chest tighten. She looked out the window, watching the city blur past, and thought about the last 3 weeks. The work. The travel. The moment in the Seoul dance studio when she'd remembered what it felt like to move without fear. She thought about the debt that was still there, still crushing, but no longer the only thing defining her existence. She thought about Cairo, Infuriating, brilliant, dangerous Cairo, and the way he'd looked at her in that penthouse when she'd said she believed him. "I'm not leaving," she said quietly. "You should." "Probably." She turned to face him. "But I'm not." Cairo studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded once. "Okay." "Okay?" "You're in, all the way, which means from now on you follow my lead. No arguments, no questions, not until we're clear." Antonia's pulse kicked up. "What does that mean?" "It means we're at war." Cairo's eyes were hard, focused. "And wars don't get won by people who hesitate." The SUV dropped them at a building in Tribeca. Industrial, converted, the kind of place that looked abandoned from the outside but cost $10 million inside. Cairo led her through a side entrance, up a service elevator, and into a loft that felt more like a command center than a home. 3 people were already there. Claire stood by the window, tablet in hand, looking like she'd been awake for 3 days straight. A man in his 40s sat at a dining table covered in laptops and monitors, close-cropped hair, military posture, the kind of stillness that came from years of seeing bad things happen. And a woman maybe 30 years old leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, watching them enter with eyes that missed nothing. Cairo set his bag down. "Antonia, this is my team. Claire, you know, that's Marcus Reed, head of security, and Yuna Choi, digital forensics." Antonia nodded at each of them, feeling suddenly out of place. "Hi." "Ms. Valles." Reed's voice was clipped, professional. "We've been monitoring the situation. Whoever took that photo used a telephoto lens from approximately 400 meters. They had advanced knowledge of your location and timing." "Which means what?" Antonia asked. "Which means they're professionals," Yuna said. Her accent was faint. Korean maybe, or somewhere close. "Not cops, not journalists, someone with resources and patience." Cairo moved to the table, looking at the monitors. "Any hits on facial recognition from Seoul?" "Nothing definitive," Yuna said, "but I pulled security footage from your hotel lobby. There's a woman who checked in 2 hours after you, paid cash. Left the next morning, no record of her before or after." She pulled up a grainy image, a woman in her 30s, dark hair, sunglasses, completely unremarkable except for the way she moved, purposeful, aware. Antonia stared at the screen. "You think she followed us?" "I think she was already there waiting," Yuna said, "which means someone knew you were coming to Seoul before you did." Cairo's expression went cold. "Pull the booking records, find out who accessed my travel itinerary." "Already on it," Yuna said, typing. "But if they're good, they covered their tracks." "No one's that good." "Marcus Lorne is." The name hung in the air like a grenade. Cairo turned to Reed. "You're sure?" 90%. Reed pulled up another screen, financial records, shell companies, a web of transactions that looked deliberately obscure. "Lorne's been moving money through Seoul for the last 6 months. Dummy corporations, real estate acquisitions, all of it designed to look legitimate but structured in a way that's suspicious." "Suspicious how?" Antonia asked. "Antonia, like he's building a case," Claire said, finally speaking. "If he can prove you're laundering gin, he can force regulatory scrutiny on every deal you've ever touched, including Elevation." Cairo's jaw tightened. "He can't prove something that isn't true." "He doesn't have to prove it," Reed said. "He just has to create enough smoke that investors get nervous. Once they start pulling out, the project dies regardless of whether you're guilty." Antonia felt the ground shift beneath her. "So this whole thing, the detective, the photo, all of it, it's not about finding the truth. It's about destroying your reputation." "Welcome to high-stakes business," Yuna said dryly. Cairo stared at the monitors, his mind clearly racing. "If Lorne's behind this, he'll keep pushing until something breaks. We need to hit back before he can consolidate." "How?" Antonia asked. "By proving Elevation is clean, spotless, so legitimate that no amount of smoke will stick." Cairo turned to her. "Which means we accelerate the timeline. We launch in 3 months instead of 6. Claire's head snapped up. "That's impossible." "It's necessary." Cairo's voice was steel. "If we wait, Lorne has time to build his case. If we launch early, we force him to either put up or shut up." The build-out isn't finished, Claire said. The vendor contracts aren't finalized. We don't have half the permits we need. Then we get them. Caro looked at Antonia. Can you deliver the creative in 3 months? Every instinct in her body screamed no. 3 months wasn't enough time to design, test, and refine an experience this complex. But she looked at Cairo, at the determination in his eyes, the certainty that failure wasn't an option, and realized he wasn't asking if it was possible. He was asking if she was willing to try. Yes, she said. Claire looked like she wanted to argue, but Cairo cut her off. Make it happen, all of you. I want daily updates. I want every detail locked down, and I want 0 leaks. He glanced at Reed. Double security on everyone involved. If Lauren's watching, I want to know about it before he does. Reed nodded. Understood. Good. Cairo grabbed his jacket. Antonia, you're with me. Where are we going? To see the space. But that's... The building was in Hudson Yards, 42 floors of glass and steel, the top 10 reserved for elevation. Cairo had the codes to bypass security, and they rode the elevator in silence, the city shrinking below them. When the doors opened, Antonia stepped into an unfinished cathedral. The space was massive, 20,000 square feet of raw potential. Exposed concrete, unfinished walls, HVAC ducts hanging like mechanical veins. But the bones were there, the flow, the possibility. She walked through it slowly, her mind already mapping the journey. Entry, transition, revelation, climax, release. Cairo stood near the windows, watching her. What do you see? Everything. Antonia stopped in the center of the room, turning slowly. I see where people let go of who they were, where they step into who they want to be. Can you build it in 3 months? I don't know. Yes or no, Antonia? She looked at him. Yes. Then do it. Cairo's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, read something, and his expression changed. Not anger, something colder. What is it? Antonia asked. He handed her the phone. It was an email, from an address she didn't recognize. No subject line. Just a single sentence. We know about the debt. Antonia's blood went cold. What does that mean? It means they know I paid it off. Cairo took the phone back, his jaw tight. And they're going to use it against us. How? You said it was legal. It is legal, but optics don't care about legality. He started pacing, his mind clearly racing. If they leak that I paid off your debt, it looks like I bought your loyalty, like you're compromised, like everything you've built for elevation is tainted. Antonia felt the floor drop out from under her. I didn't ask you to pay it off. I know. I didn't even know you did it until it... I know. Cairo stopped pacing, facing her. But that won't matter. They'll twist it into something ugly. And once it's out there, we can't take it back. So what do? We get ahead of it. Cairo pulled out his phone again, started typing. I'm going to have my lawyers draft a statement. Full disclosure. The debt was paid through a third-party financial services company as part of a standard employee assistance program. Everything documented, everything clean. Will that work? It'll have to. Antonia's hands were shaking. This is insane. This is business. No. She stepped closer, her voice rising. Business is contracts and negotiations and deals. This is someone trying to destroy your life and mine. For what? Money? Pride? Power. Cairo's eyes were hard. Lauren doesn't just want to beat me. He wants to erase me. Make an example. Show the world what happens when you compete with him. Then why not just walk away? Give him what he wants. Because I don't lose. The certainty in his voice should have sounded arrogant. Instead, it sounded like survival. Antonia looked around the empty space, at the vision she'd started to build, at the future she'd barely let herself believe in, and felt something harden in her chest. Neither do I, she said. Cairo studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Good, because this is about to get worse before it gets better. How much worse? His phone buzzed again. He looked at the screen and his expression went completely still. Cairo? He turned the phone toward her. Another email. Another unknown sender. This time, there was an attachment. A photo. of her father, in the hospital, taken 3 days before he died. Antonia's vision blurred, her knees buckled, and she grabbed the nearest support beam to keep from collapsing. How did they? How? I don't know. Cairo's voice was tight, controlled, but she could hear the rage beneath it. But they're sending a message. What message? That nothing's off limits. Antonia stared at the photo, at her father's face, gaunt and exhausted, the IV lines running into his arms, the machines keeping him alive for just a few more days. She'd been there when that photo was taken. She'd been holding his hand. Someone had been watching even then. I'm going to kill them, she said quietly. Cairo looked at her, and for the first time she saw something like approval in his eyes. Get in line. His phone rang. He answered it, listened for 10 seconds, then hung up. We need to go, he said. Why? Because Detective Han just landed at JFK. Antonia's stomach dropped. She followed us back? Worse. Cairo grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the elevator. She's not here on an investigation. She's here to arrest me, but Bassin. They didn't go back to the loft. Cairo made 3 calls in the car, one to his lawyer, one to Reed, one to someone whose name he didn't say. Then he powered the phone down and looked at Antonia. How much do you trust me? He asked. Why? Because I need you to do something, and you're not going to like it. Antonia's pulse hammered. What? I need you to disappear for 48 hours. Absolutely not. Antonia. His voice was sharp, urgent. If Han arrests me, she'll bring you in for questioning. And if they question you, they'll find out about the debt, about Seoul, about everything. You'll get dragged into a legal nightmare that'll destroy your career before it even starts. I don't care. I do. Cairo grabbed her hand, his grip firm. I need you safe. I need you clean. And I need you ready to finish Elevation if this goes sideways. If you go to jail, I won't. His eyes locked on hers. But if I do, you need to be able to walk away. No ties. No leverage. Nothing they can use against you. Antonia felt tears burning behind her eyes. I'm not leaving you. You're not leaving me. You're protecting yourself. Cairo pulled a key from his pocket and pressed it into her palm. There's an apartment in Brooklyn, Red Hook. The address is on the key. Go there. Don't use your phone. Don't contact anyone. Just wait. For what? For me to fix this. The car stopped. Cairo opened the door, stepped out, and looked back at her. 48 hours, Antonia. That's all I need. And if you don't fix it, then you run, as far and as fast as you can. He started to close the door, then paused. And you forget you ever met me. The door slammed shut, the car pulled away. And Antonia sat alone in the back seat, the key cutting into her palm, watching Cairo disappear into the New York night. Deacon. The apartment in Red Hook was small, clean, and completely anonymous. No personal items, no photos, just furniture, basic supplies, and a view of the harbor. Antonia sat on the couch, staring at the key in her hand, and tried not to fall apart. Her father's photo kept flashing in her mind. The hospital room. The machines. The way he'd looked at her 3 days before he died and said, "You don't owe me anything." But she did. She owed him everything. And now someone was using that, using him to destroy the first good thing she'd built in over a year. Her new phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. He lied to you. Antonia stared at the screen, her heart pounding. Another message. The debt wasn't paid legally. Check the transaction records. A third message. He's not who you think he is. Then a file attachment, PDF, transaction records. Antonia's hand shook as she opened it. Pages and pages of financial documents, wire transfers, shell companies, offshore accounts. And there, buried in the middle, was a payment. $380,000, routed through 4 different entities before landing in the hospital's account. The date was 2 weeks before Cairo had ever walked into her dressing room. 2 weeks before he'd offered her the job. 2 weeks before he'd claimed he was giving her a future. Antonia's vision tunneled. He'd paid off her debt before they'd even met. Which meant everything. The job offer, the signing bonus, the trip to Seoul, the trust he'd asked her to give him. All of it had been a lie. She'd been a mark from the beginning. Her phone buzzed again. He's using you to legitimize dirty money. Walk away now, or you go down with him." Antonia stood up, her legs unsteady, and walked to the window. The harbor stretched out before her, dark and endless. And for the first time since her father died, she let herself break. She didn't cry, didn't scream, just stood there, feeling everything inside her crack and shatter. Then her phone rang. She looked at the screen, Cairo. She answered. "Where are you?" His voice was tight, strained. "The apartment." Her voice came out flat, dead. "Like you told me." "Good. Stay there. I'm handling this." "You paid off my debt 2 weeks before we met." Silence. "Antonia, don't," her voice cracked. "Don't lie to me anymore." "I didn't lie. You researched me. You engineered the whole thing, the job, the contract, all of it." Her hands were shaking so hard she almost dropped the phone. "I was never a hire. I was a target." "That's not—" "Yes or no, Jin? Did you pay off my debt before you offered me the job?" Another silence, then quietly, "Yes." Antonia closed her eyes. "But it's not what you think." "I don't care what it is." She opened her eyes, staring at her reflection in the window. "I'm done." "Antonia, listen to me." She hung up. The phone immediately started ringing again. She powered it off. Then she sat down on the floor, her back against the wall, and tried to figure out who the hell she was supposed to be now. She didn't sleep. She sat in the dark apartment, replaying every conversation, every moment, every time Cairo had looked at her like she mattered. It had all been a performance, just like hers. At 4 a.m., someone knocked on the door. Antonia stood slowly, her body aching. She looked through the peephole. Cairo stood in the hallway, looking like he'd been through hell. His suit was wrinkled. His tie was gone. There was a cut above his eyebrow that hadn't been there before. "Open the door," he said. "No." "Antonia, please, go away." "I can't." His voice was raw, desperate. "Not until you hear me out. I don't want to hear it. I paid off your debt because I knew you'd never take the job if you were drowning." The words came fast, urgent. "I knew you were good. I knew you could build something no one else could. And I knew you'd say no if you were too desperate to think straight. So you manipulated me. I gave you a choice." His voice cracked. "A real one. Without the debt crushing you, without survival being the only thing that mattered. You took away my agency. I gave you freedom." He slammed his hand against the door. "You think I don't know what it's like to be trapped? To have every decision made for you by circumstances you can't control? I gave you the one thing no one ever gave me, a chance to choose your life instead of just enduring it." Antonia pressed her forehead against the door, tears streaming down her face. "You should have told me." "I know. You should have trusted me." "I know." His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "And I'm sorry." She stood there, her hand on the doorknob, every part of her screaming to open it, but she didn't. "The transaction records," she said. "The shell companies, the offshore accounts. Explain that." "It's standard privacy protection. Wealthy people don't wire money directly because it creates paper trails that get exploited. I used intermediaries to keep your name, and mine, out of public records." "That's convenient." "It's true." She heard him sit down, his back probably against the door. "Everything I did was legal, every step, but I knew how it would look if anyone found out. So I hid it, not because it was dirty, because I didn't want you to feel like you owed me." "I do owe you." "No, you don't." His voice was firm. "You earned that job. You've earned everything since. The debt was just noise. I turned down the volume so you could hear yourself think." Antonia slid down to the floor, her back against the door, separated from him by 3 inches of wood. "Who sent me those files?" she asked. "Lorne. Or someone working for him." Cairo's voice was tired, defeated. "They're trying to turn you against me, make you think I'm the villain so you'll walk away from elevation." "Maybe I should." "Maybe." He was quiet for a moment. "But then they win, and everything you've built dies with my reputation." Antonia closed her eyes. "I don't know if I can trust you." "I know. I don't know if any of this is real." "It is. His voice was barely audible. All of it. The work, the project, what we're building. That's real. And us? Silence. Then, yeah, that's real too. Antonia's breath hitched. I didn't plan on that part, Cairo said quietly. I didn't plan on caring whether you stayed. I didn't plan on it mattering this much. She heard him shift, his voice closer now. But it does. And I'm asking you one more time to trust me, just long enough to finish this. Antonia sat there, tears drying on her cheeks, staring at the ceiling. Then she opened the door. Cairo looked up at her, exhausted and broken and somehow still standing. 48 hours, she said. What? You get 48 hours to prove you're not lying, to prove elevation is clean, to prove I'm not just another piece in whatever game you're playing. Her voice was steel. And if you can't, I walk, forever. Cairo stood slowly. And if I can? Antonia met his eyes. Then we finish what we started. He nodded once. Deal. He turned to leave, then stopped. For what it's worth, I meant what I said about you being necessary. Don't. I need you to know, Cairo. She looked at him, her voice breaking. Just go prove it. He held her gaze for one more second. Then he walked away. And Antonia closed the door, leaned against it, and wondered if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. Or if she was finally learning how to fight for something that mattered. Antonia didn't leave the apartment for 12 hours. She sat at the small kitchen table, staring at the transaction records on her phone, cross-referencing every shell company, every wire transfer, every name that appeared in the chain. Her eyes burned. Her head throbbed. But she kept going because if Cairo was lying, if any of this was dirty, she needed to know before she committed to finishing what they'd started. By hour 6, she'd traced 3 of the intermediary companies, all legitimate, all registered financial services firms that specialized in privacy-protected transactions for high-net-worth individuals. The kind of thing rich people used to keep their charity donations anonymous or to pay off debts without the recipient knowing who'd helped them. By hour 9, she'd found the original source account, Cairo's personal holdings. Not a shell company, not an offshore slush fund, just his money, legally earned, legally transferred. By hour 12, she had to admit it, he'd been telling the truth. The debt payoff was clean, which meant someone had taken legitimate documents and framed them to look suspicious, planted doubt where there should have been none, turned privacy into evidence of guilt. Antonia pushed away from the table, her hands shaking. Her phone buzzed. A text from the new number Cairo had given her. Reed has something. Meet me at the Tribeca loft. Now. She stared at the message, every instinct still screaming at her to run. But she'd given him 48 hours. And she wasn't a coward. She grabbed her jacket and left. The loft was chaos when she arrived. Monitors covered every surface. Una sat at one station, fingers flying across 3 keyboards simultaneously. Reed stood behind her, phone pressed to his ear, barking orders in a clipped monotone. Claire paced near the windows, tablet in hand, her usual composure cracked around the edges. Cairo stood in the center of it all, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, looking like a general commanding a war room. He saw Antonia and crossed to her immediately. You came. You said 48 hours. Her voice was flat, guarded. I'm here to see proof. You'll get it. He gestured toward Una's station. We found the source. Antonia followed him to the monitors. Una pulled up a series of emails, bank records, and travel manifests, all linked to a single corporate entity. Lorne didn't just tip off the Seoul police, Una said without looking up. He manufactured the entire investigation, paid a mid-level detective to open a case, fed her falsified documents that made your financial transactions look like laundering, even hired the woman who followed you to Seoul. Antonia's stomach dropped. Detective Han was bought? Not exactly. Una pulled up a photo. Han Ji-soo, younger, in uniform, standing beside a man Antonia recognized from the earlier briefing. Marcus Lorne. She worked a corruption case in Seoul 5 years ago. Lorne was a witness. They stayed in contact. When he needed someone to make noise about your activities, she was the perfect asset. She thinks she's investigating a real crime, Reed added. Lauren fed her just enough truth mixed with fiction that she believes she's doing her job. So she's not dirty, Antonia said. She's a pawn. Exactly. Cairo's jaw was tight, which means we can't just discredit her. We have to prove she was manipulated. Otherwise, she doubles down and the investigation gets real. How do we prove it? Yuna grinned, sharp, vicious. By showing her the money trail, Lauren paid for her flights, her hotel, even her anonymous tipster who fed her the initial information. All of it traces back to a shell company he controls. She pulled up the records. Wire transfers, corporate filings, a web of transactions that all pointed to one conclusion. Marcus Lorne had orchestrated the entire thing. This is enough to kill the investigation, Claire said. We send this to Han. She realizes she's been used. She drops the case. It's not enough to stop Lorne, Cairo said. He'll just regroup. Try something else. We need to destroy him completely. How? Antonia asked. Cairo looked at her and she saw something dangerous in his eyes. By beating him at his own game. The plan was insane. Cairo wanted to accelerate Elevation's launch to 8 weeks, not 3 months. 8 weeks. It's impossible, Claire said for the 4th time. It's necessary. Cairo pulled up the project timeline, started marking deadlines. We launch before Lorne can build a new attack. We invite every major investor, every media outlet, every regulatory body that's ever questioned my legitimacy. We show them something so flawless, so transparently clean, that no amount of manufactured scandal can touch it. The build-out isn't done. Then we finish it. Cairo's voice was steel. We work 24-hour shifts. We bring in additional crews. We throw money at every problem until it disappears. The permits? Already being expedited. Cairo glanced at Reed, who nodded. I called in every favor I have. We'll have them by Friday. Claire looked like she wanted to argue, but she just closed her eyes and nodded. Fine. But if this fails... It won't. Cairo turned to Antonia. Can you finish the creative design in 8 weeks? Antonia's mind raced. 8 weeks meant no room for iteration. No time to test and refine. Everything had to work perfectly on the first try. It was professional suicide, or the greatest thing she'd ever build. Yes, she said. Cairo almost smiled. Then we move. But the next 6 weeks were a blur of controlled chaos. Antonia lived at the Hudson Yards site, sleeping 3 hours a night on a cot in the corner office, surviving on coffee and takeout and pure adrenaline. She worked with artists, fabricators, lighting designers, sound engineers, anyone who could help bring her vision to life. The space transformed around her, evolving from raw concrete into something that felt alive. The entry sequence became a hallway of mirrors and shadow, forcing guests to confront their reflection before moving forward. The first room opened into a gallery of suspended sculptures, abstract forms that shifted as you walked past, never the same twice. The second room was all sound, a chamber where music pulsed through the floor, making your bones vibrate, making you feel the rhythm in your chest. The third room was intimate, small tables, low lighting, live musicians playing improvised compositions based on the energy of the people in the space. It felt like walking into someone's private memory. The fourth room exploded, a dance floor, a full band, lighting that responded to movement. Antonia had hired 12 dancers, all different styles, all different backgrounds, to move through the crowd, not performing but inviting, pulling people into motion. And the final room, the piece she'd fought hardest for, was empty. Just windows. Just sky. Just New York stretching out beneath you like a promise. The journey took 90 minutes if you moved slowly, 60 if you rushed. But the point wasn't duration. It was transformation. By the time you reached that final room, you were supposed to feel different, lighter, more alive. Antonia stood in the empty room 2 days before launch and wondered if she'd actually pulled it off. Cairo appeared beside her. She hadn't heard him approach. It's perfect, he said quietly. It's not finished. It doesn't need to be. He looked around, taking in the space. You built exactly what I asked for, a place where people remember who they want to be. Antonia's throat tightened. I hope it's enough. It is. Cairo turned to her, and for the first time in weeks, she saw something other than exhaustion in his eyes. Pride, maybe. Or relief. You did this, Antonia, not me. You. She wanted to believe him, wanted to let herself feel the victory, but the launch was still 2 days away, and Lorne was still out there. The morning of the launch, everything went wrong. At 6 a.m., the fire marshal showed up unannounced, demanding to inspect the space. Reed intercepted him, discovered the inspection was triggered by an anonymous complaint filed 12 hours earlier. At 9 a.m., 3 vendors called to cancel. Equipment failures, scheduling conflicts, excuses that sounded rehearsed. At 11 a.m., the lead lighting designer quit. No explanation, just packed his equipment and walked out. Cairo handled each crisis with surgical precision, finding replacement vendors, rerouting inspections, bribing the lighting designer's assistant to step up. But Antonia could see the cracks forming, the stress fractures. At 2 p.m., her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Ms. Valles. The voice was smooth, cultured, British. My name is Marcus Lorne. I think it's time we spoke. Antonia's blood went cold. I have nothing to say to you. I think you do. Lorne's tone was pleasant, conversational. I'm calling to offer you a way out. I don't want... Jin Cairo is a criminal. The pleasantness evaporated. I've spent 5 years documenting his activities. Money laundering, bribery, fraud. He's very good at hiding it, but eventually the truth surfaces. And when it does, everyone associated with him goes down. You're lying. Am I? Lorne paused. Then explain the Seoul investigation. Explain the offshore accounts. Explain why he paid off your father's medical debt before you'd ever met him. Antonia's hands shook. That was legitimate. That was leverage. He bought you, made you dependent. And now you're so deep in his organization that when the authorities finally move, you'll be charged as an accomplice. That's not... Unless you walk away. Lorne's voice softened. I'm offering you immunity, Ms. Valles. Full protection. A new position with one of my firms, double your current salary. All you have to do is testify about what you've seen. Antonia's heart hammered. I haven't seen anything illegal. Then you have nothing to worry about. Lorne sounded almost sympathetic. But if I'm right, if Cairo is dirty, do you really want to go to prison for him? I'm not testifying against him. Then you're a fool. The sympathy vanished. This launch will fail. Your reputation will be destroyed. And Cairo will abandon you the moment it's convenient. That's what he does. He uses people and discards them. You don't know him. I know men like him. Lorne's voice was cold now, final. I've destroyed dozens. He's no different. We'll see. Antonia hung up. Her hands were shaking so hard she almost dropped the phone. Cairo appeared in the doorway. Who is that? Lorne. His expression went dark. What did he want? To turn me against you. Antonia looked up at him. He offered me immunity, a new job, everything. And? I told him to go to hell. Something shifted in Cairo's face, relief and something deeper. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Antonia stood, crossing to the window. He said the launch will fail, that you'll abandon me, that I'm going to prison. He's trying to rattle you. It's working. She turned to face him. Tell me the truth, Jin. Right now. No evasions, no strategies. Is there anything at all that I don't know about? Anything that could come out tonight and destroy this? Cairo held her gaze. No. You're sure? I'm sure. He crossed to her, close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the strain he'd been carrying for weeks. Everything I've built is clean. Every transaction, every deal, every dollar. Lorne can dig for the rest of his life, and he won't find dirt because there isn't any. Then why is he so confident? Because he's desperate. Cairo's voice was hard. He's lost 3 major contracts to me in the last year. His investors are getting nervous. If Elevation succeeds, it proves I'm legitimate. It proves he's been wasting resources chasing ghosts. He loses credibility, maybe his entire firm. So this is about survival. It's always about survival. Cairo stepped closer. But we're going to win. Tonight, we launch. We show the world what we built. And Lorne becomes irrelevant. Antonia wanted to believe him, but belief felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. The launch started at 8 p.m. The guest list was elite, 200 of the most influential people in New York. Investors, media, regulators, everyone who mattered. Antonia stood in the entry hall, watching them arrive, and tried not to throw up. She'd changed into a black dress. Simple, elegant, the kind of thing that wouldn't distract from the space. Her hair was pulled back. No jewelry, no makeup beyond what was necessary. She looked like someone who belonged here. She felt like an imposter. Cairo appeared beside her wearing a perfectly tailored suit, looking calm and controlled. Ready? No. Good. Neither am I. He offered his arm. Let's go prove we're worth believing in. They walked into the first room together. The reaction was immediate. People stopped talking, stopped moving, just stood there, absorbing the space. The mirrors caught their reflections, multiplied them, forced them to see themselves as part of the experience. The lighting shifted, subtle, organic, guiding them forward without obvious direction. Antonia watched a venture capitalist reach out to touch one of the suspended sculptures, his face full of wonder. She watched a fashion editor pause in the sound chamber, eyes closed, letting the music vibrate through her bones. She watched a city councilman sit at one of the intimate tables, ordering a drink, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen a politician look. By the time they reached the dance floor, people were moving, not forced, not performative, just moving. The dancers wove through the crowd, and Antonia saw what she'd been trying to create. That moment when strangers became part of something larger, when the walls came down, when people remembered what it felt like to be alive. Cairo squeezed her hand. You did it. Antonia couldn't speak, could barely breathe. They'd actually done it. Then someone screamed. The music cut out, the light snapped on, harsh, bright, blinding, and Detective Han Jisoo walked into the room flanked by 4 NYPD officers. Jin Cairo, she said, her voice carrying across the sudden silence. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and money laundering. The room erupted. Guests scattered. Cameras appeared. Reporters started shouting questions. Antonia stood frozen, watching Cairo's face go completely blank. This is a mistake, he said calmly. We have evidence. Han pulled out a document, held it up. Wire transfers, shell companies, falsified tax records, all linked to your organization. Those records are fabricated. Tell it to the judge. Han nodded to the officers, who moved toward Cairo. Antonia stepped between them. Don't touch him. Han looked at her. Ms. Valles, step aside. No. Antonia's voice was shaking but firm. You're making a mistake. Someone fed you false information. I've reviewed the evidence personally. The evidence is fake. Antonia pulled out her phone, pulled up the files Yuna had compiled. Marcus Lorne manufactured this entire investigation. He paid for your flights, your hotel, your informant. All of it traces back to him. Han's expression flickered. That's impossible. It's documented. Antonia shoved the phone toward her. Wire transfers, corporate filings, flight manifests. He's been using you to destroy a competitor. Han stared at the screen, her face draining of color. You wanted to catch a criminal, Antonia said. You caught the wrong one. The room was silent. Then Han looked up at Cairo. Is this true? Every word, Cairo said quietly. Han turned to the officers. Stand down. Detective. I said stand down. Han pulled out her own phone, started scrolling through something. Her hands were shaking. I need to make a call. She walked away, the officers following. The room exhaled. Cairo looked at Antonia. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Why? Because I believe you. Her voice cracked. And because I'm done letting other people tell me what's true. Cairo's expression broke just for a second. Then he pulled her into his arms, holding her like she might disappear. The guests were still watching, still filming. Antonia didn't care. She'd just bet everything on a man she barely knew. And for the first time in her life, it felt like the right choice. 20 minutes later, Han returned. Her face was ashen. I just spoke with my supervisor in Seoul. They're opening an investigation into Marcus Lorne. If your evidence holds up, he'll be charged with obstruction of justice and conspiracy. It'll hold up, Cairo said. Han looked at him for a long moment, then she bowed slightly. I apologize for the disruption, for believing... Her voice broke. I thought I was doing my job. You were. Cairo's tone was surprisingly gentle. Lorne's very good at manipulation. Han nodded once, then turned and left, the officers trailing behind her. The room remained silent for exactly 3 seconds. Then someone started clapping. A venture capitalist. Then a fashion editor. Then a city councilman. Within seconds, the entire room was applauding. Not for the arrest, not for the drama, for the fact that they just witnessed something real. Antonia looked at Cairo, and he looked back at her, and she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Relief, gratitude, and something that looked dangerously close to love. The music started again. The lights dimmed, and people went back to dancing, like nothing had happened, like everything had happened. At midnight, after the last guest had left, Antonia and Cairo stood in the final room, the empty one with just windows and sky. The city glittered below them, infinite and indifferent. We did it, Antonia said quietly. You did it. Cairo turned to her. I just gave you the space. You filled it with something I couldn't have imagined. Don't do that. Do what? Give me all the credit. This was both of us. She looked at him. We built this together. Cairo was quiet for a moment, then he said, I need to tell you something. Antonia's stomach dropped. What? The debt. He ran a hand through his hair. I did pay it off before we met, but not to manipulate you. Then why? Because I saw you perform, saw what you could do, and I knew... His voice caught. I knew if you were buried under that kind of pressure, you'd never be able to create freely. You'd just be surviving, and survival doesn't build art. It builds walls. Antonia's throat tightened. So you gave me freedom. I tried to. Cairo met her eyes. I'm not good at this. At caring about people. At letting anyone matter, but you... He stopped, searching for words. You matter. More than the project, more than the money, more than any of it. Antonia stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat coming off him. Say that again. You matter. No, the part about caring. Cairo's mouth curved, barely. I care about you, Antonia Valles, more than I should, more than is probably smart. Good. She reached up, pulled him down by his collar, and kissed him. It wasn't gentle, wasn't soft. It was 14 months of grief, 6 weeks of chaos, and every moment of doubt she'd swallowed finally breaking free. Cairo kissed her back like he'd been waiting his entire life for permission. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Antonia said, This is a terrible idea. Probably. We worked together. We just survived an arrest. We're both disasters. Completely. Cairo's hand stayed on her waist, solid and sure. Does that mean you want me to stop? Antonia looked at him, really looked at him. At the man who'd paid off her debt without asking, who'd given her a future when she'd lost hope, who'd stood in a room full of people and let himself be arrested rather than run, who'd looked at her like she was necessary. No, she said. It means I'm done pretending I don't want this. Cairo smiled, really smiled, for the first time since she'd met him. Good, because I'm not letting you walk away. Possessive much? Only when it matters. Antonia laughed, and it felt like something inside her had finally unlocked. Then her phone buzzed. She almost ignored it, but the number on the screen made her freeze. Cairo saw her expression. What's wrong? Antonia answered the call. Hello? A woman's voice. American, professional. Ms. Valles, this is Agent Sarah Chen, FBI. I'm calling about Jin Cairo's financial activities. We need you to come in for questioning, tomorrow. 9 a.m., Federal Plaza. Don't be late. The line went dead. Antonia lowered the phone, her hands shaking. Cairo's expression went cold. What did they say? FBI, they want me to testify. She looked up at him, feeling the victory slip through her fingers. Jin, what did you do? Nothing. But his voice was too quiet, too controlled. Don't lie to me. Not now. Cairo turned away, staring out at the city. There's one thing I didn't tell you. Antonia's heart stopped. What? 2 years ago, I made a deal, a partnership. I didn't know at the time that the other party was under investigation for securities fraud. He kept his back to her. By the time I found out, I'd already signed contracts, moved money. The deal fell through, but the connection exists. On paper, it looks like I was complicit. Were you? No. But proving it means exposing financial records I've kept private for a decade. He finally turned to face her. Records that could destroy relationships with half my investors. Could tank every project I've got running, including Elevation. Antonia felt the ground shift beneath her. So what are you saying? I'm saying I have a choice. Cairo's voice was raw. I can cooperate with the FBI, clear my name, and watch everything I've built collapse. Or I can fight them, delay, protect my business, and look guilty. There has to be another way. There isn't. He crossed to her, grabbed her hands. But you have a choice too. You can testify. Tell them what you know, walk away clean, or you can stand with me and risk going down if I can't prove my innocence. Antonia stared at him, her world tilting. Everything they'd built, everything they'd survived, it all came down to this. What do you want me to do? She asked. Cairo's grip tightened. I want you to save yourself. That's not what I asked. He closed his eyes. I want you to stay. Antonia pulled her hands free, stepped back, and looked at the man who'd given her everything and might take it all away. The city stretched out below them, endless and unforgiving. And she had less than 12 hours to decide who she was going to become. Antonia didn't sleep. She sat in Cairo's penthouse, the one in Tribeca, not Seoul, and watched the city wake up through floor-to-ceiling windows. The sun bled across the skyline, turning glass towers into mirrors of fire, and all she could think about was the choice sitting in her chest like a stone. Stay or run. Trust or survive. At 6 a.m., Cairo emerged from his office, looking like he hadn't slept either. He'd changed into a fresh suit, but his eyes were red-rimmed, his jaw tight. He stopped when he saw her sitting by the window. You're still here, he said quietly. Where else would I be? Packing, running, protecting yourself. He crossed to the kitchen, started making coffee with mechanical precision. That's what smart people do. Then I guess I'm not smart. Cairo's hand stilled on the espresso machine. Antonia, I'm going to the FBI. She stood, turning to face him. And I'm telling them everything I know. His face went carefully blank. Which is that you're not a criminal, that Marcus Lorne manufactured evidence to destroy you, that every transaction I've seen has been legitimate. She crossed to him, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her throat. And that if they want to investigate you, they better have real evidence, not conspiracy theories from a competitor. Cairo stared at her. They'll tear you apart on the stand. Let them try. They'll ask about the debt, about Seoul, about every conversation we've had. His voice was raw. They'll make it look like you're covering for me because I bought your loyalty. I don't care what it looks like. Antonia stepped closer, close enough to see the exhaustion etched into every line of his face. I care about the truth. And the truth is that you gave me a chance when I had nothing left. That doesn't make me bought. It makes me grateful. Gratitude isn't the same as, I'm not doing this out of gratitude. She grabbed his collar, forcing him to look at her. I'm doing this because I believe in what we built. Because I've seen your financials, because I've watched you operate for 2 months, and I know the difference between a criminal and someone who just plays the game better than everyone else. Cairo's throat worked. What if you're wrong? Then I'll deal with the consequences. She released him, stepped back. But I'm not wrong, and I'm not running. For a long moment, they just stood there, the coffee machine hissing between them. Then Cairo said, I don't deserve you. Probably not. Antonia almost smiled. But you're stuck with me anyway. Mucking. Federal Plaza was a fortress of concrete and bureaucracy. Antonia walked through security at 8:45 a.m., her hands steady, her mind clear. Cairo had wanted to come with her, but she'd refused. This was something she needed to do alone. Agent Sarah Chen met her in a conference room on the 6th floor, mid-40s, sharp suit, the kind of face that had seen every lie humanity had to offer and stopped being surprised years ago. Ms. Velez, Chen gestured to a chair. Thank you for coming. Did I have a choice? Everyone has a choice. Chen sat across from her, opened a file. You chose to work for Jin Cairo, to accept money from him, to help him launch a project that's currently under investigation for financial irregularities. Those were all choices. Antonia met her eyes. Are you charging me with something? Should I be? No. Chen smiled, thin, humorless. Then let's talk about your employer. How did you meet Mr. Cairo? He walked into my dressing room and offered me a job. Just like that? Just like that? Antonia leaned back, keeping her voice calm. He said he was launching a project and needed someone who understood how to create experiences. He'd seen me perform, thought I was a good fit. And you didn't find that suspicious? Why would I? Because men like Jin Cairo don't offer six-figure salaries to strangers. Chen pulled out a document. Especially strangers drowning in medical debt. There it was. The trap. Antonia didn't flinch. He researched me. That's what smart business people do. They find talent and invest in it. He paid off your debt before you ever met him. Yes. Chen's eyebrows rose. You admit it? Why wouldn't I? It's not illegal. Antonia pulled out her phone, opened the files she'd memorized. He used a third-party financial services company to anonymously settle the debt. Everything was documented. Everything was legal. The hospital received payment. I received relief. No laws were broken. It looks like he bought your loyalty. It looks like he gave me a chance to do my job without drowning. Antonia's voice hardened. I didn't ask him to pay it off. I didn't even know he had until weeks later. But when I found out, I checked the records, traced every transaction, made sure it was clean. And was it? Completely. Chen studied her. You're very loyal to a man you barely know. I'm loyal to the truth. Antonia leaned forward. And the truth is that Jin Cairo is being targeted by a competitor who's manufacturing evidence to destroy him. Marcus Lorne orchestrated the sole investigation. He paid for Detective Han's travel. He fed her falsified documents. All of it is documented. We're aware of Mr. Lorne's activities. Then why are you investigating Cairo instead of him? Because Lorne's activities don't erase Cairo's. Chen pulled out another file. 2 years ago, your employer partnered with a company called Vertex Capital. That company was later indicted for securities fraud. Cairo moved $20 million through their accounts before the partnership dissolved. Antonia's stomach dropped, but she kept her face neutral. Did he know Vertex was under investigation when he made the deal? That's what we're trying to determine. Then you should ask him directly instead of trying to flip his employees. Antonia stood. If you have evidence of a crime, charge him. If you don't, stop wasting my time. Chen didn't move. Sit down, Ms. Velez. Am I under arrest? No. Then I'm leaving. Antonia grabbed her bag. If you want to talk again, call my lawyer. She walked out before Chen could respond. Her hands didn't start shaking until she was in the elevator. Cairo was waiting in the lobby. He stood near the windows, hands in his pockets, looking like he'd aged 10 years in 2 hours. When he saw her, relief flooded his face. How bad? He asked. They know about Vertex. His expression went cold. What did you tell them? That they should ask you directly. Antonia crossed to him, lowering her voice. Jin, what the hell is Vertex Capital? A mistake. He grabbed her arm, guided her toward the exit. Not here. Let's go. They didn't speak until they were in the car. Windows up, driver instructed to circle the block. Then Cairo said, Vertex was a legitimate investment firm when I partnered with them. They specialized in emerging markets, high risk, high reward. I moved money through their accounts for 6 months while we evaluated opportunities in Southeast Asia. And then the SEC started investigating them for pump and dump schemes. By the time I found out, I'd already moved $20 million. I pulled out immediately, dissolved the partnership, but the transactions exist. On paper, it looks like I was involved. Antonia's chest tightened. Were you? No. Cairo's voice was firm. I didn't know what they were doing. The moment I found out, I walked away. But proving that means opening my financial records for the entire partnership period, which means exposing client lists, investment strategies, proprietary information that could tank relationships with dozens of investors. So you're choosing to look guilty instead of proving you're innocent. I'm choosing to protect the people who trust me. He turned to face her. If I cooperate fully, I clear my name. But I destroy everyone who's ever invested with me. Their privacy gets violated. Their names get leaked. Some of them have legitimate reasons for keeping their financial activities quiet. I'm not willing to throw them under the bus to save myself. Antonia stared at him. That's incredibly stupid. Probably. It's also incredibly noble. Don't make me sound like a hero. Cairo's laugh was bitter. I'm protecting my business interests. If my clients lose faith in me, I lose everything anyway. So what do we do? Cairo looked out the window, watching the city blur past. We prove my innocence without exposing my clients. How? By finding the person at Vertex who ran the fraud. By proving I had no knowledge of their activities. By building a case so airtight that the FBI has to believe me. He pulled out his phone, started typing. Reed's already on it. If there's evidence that clears me, he'll find it. And if there isn't? Cairo's jaw tightened. Then I fight, and I hope I'm good enough to win. The next 3 days were a war of attrition. Reed and Yuna worked around the clock, digging through Vertex Capital's history. They found the executives who'd orchestrated the fraud, 3 men who'd already been indicted, one of whom had turned state's evidence. They tracked down emails, meeting notes, transaction records that proved Cairo had been kept in the dark about the illegal activities. But it wasn't enough. The FBI wanted proof that Cairo hadn't benefited from the fraud, that none of his investments had been inflated by Vertex's schemes, that he'd acted in good faith the entire time. Proving a negative was almost impossible. On the 4th day, Yuna found something. She burst into the loft at 2 a.m., laptop in hand, eyes wild with exhaustion and triumph. I got it. Carol looked up from the table where he'd been reviewing documents. Got what? Proof. Yuna pulled up a file, an email chain between Vertex executives. They discussed hiding their activities from external partners, specifically from you. They knew if you found out, you'd pull your money, so they created false reports, made everything look legitimate. Cairo read the emails, his expression unreadable. When was this sent? 4 months before you dissolved the partnership. Yuna grinned, which means you couldn't have known. They were actively deceiving you. Antonia felt something loosen in her chest. That clears him. It should. Caro was still staring at the screen. But we need to verify the emails are authentic. The FBI will tear them apart if there's any question about the source. Already done. Yuna pulled up forensic analysis, metadata, IP addresses, server logs. These emails are real, backed up on 3 different servers, no tampering, no fabrication. Cairo finally looked up, and Antonia saw something she'd never seen in his eyes before. Hope. Send it to my lawyer, he said. All of it. Every file. Every piece of evidence. Yuna nodded and started typing. Cairo stood, crossed to the window, and for the first time in days his shoulders relaxed. Antonia joined him. Is it over? Not yet. He glanced at her. But it's close. Monk. The FBI called 2 days later. Agent Chen's voice was clipped, professional. Mr. Cairo, we've reviewed the evidence your team provided. The emails from Vertex Capital are authentic. They support your claim that you had no knowledge of the fraudulent activities. Cairo's grip tightened on the phone. And we're closing our investigation into your involvement. You're no longer a person of interest. Cairo closed his eyes. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Chen's tone hardened. Marcus Lorne has been indicted for obstruction of justice and conspiracy to commit fraud. We're building cases against several other individuals who participated in attempts to discredit you. Detective Han has been cleared. She was acting in good faith based on false information. I understand. One more thing. Chen paused. The evidence Ms. Valles provided was instrumental in our decision to pursue Lorne. She put herself at significant risk by testifying. You should know that. Cairo looked across the room at Antonia, who was pretending not to listen. I know. Good. Don't waste it. Chen hung up. Cairo set the phone down slowly, like it might shatter. Antonia crossed to him. What did she say? It's over. His voice was rough. We're clear. Antonia felt her knees buckle. Cairo caught her, pulled her against his chest, and they just stood there, holding each other like they'd survived a war. Because they had. Elevation officially launched 3 weeks later. The scandal had only made it more desirable. Every media outlet covered the story: the rivalry, the manufactured investigation, the dramatic arrest at the opening night. It became the thing everyone in New York had to experience. Memberships sold out in 48 hours. The waiting list stretched to 18 months. Cairo Holdings' stock price tripled, and Antonia Valles became the most sought-after creative director in the city. She could have left, could have taken any of the dozen offers that flooded her inbox, could have built her own firm, her own empire. But she didn't. Because what she'd built with Cairo wasn't just a project. It was a partnership, a collaboration, something that only worked because they understood each other in a way no one else could. 2 months after launch, Cairo called her into his office. It was the first time she'd seen him use one. He'd been moving constantly since the investigation closed, meeting with investors, rebuilding relationships, expanding into 3 new markets. But today, he sat behind a desk, looking almost settled. "Sit," he said. Antonia sat. "This feels formal." "It is." He pulled out a document, slid it across the desk. "I'm making you partner." Antonia stared at the contract. "What?" 49% stake in Elevation, full equity, equal decision-making authority. Cairo leaned back. "You built this as much as I did. You should own it." "Jin, I can't." Yes, you can." His voice was firm. "You've earned it. And I'm not asking. I'm telling you. Sign the contract or I'm dissolving the company." Antonia looked at him. "You're insane." "I'm practical." He pushed a pen toward her. "You saved my life. The least I can do is give you half of what we built." Antonia picked up the pen, her hands shaking. "This is too much." "It's exactly enough." She signed. When she looked up, Cairo was smiling, really smiling, the kind that reached his eyes. "Welcome to the partnership, Antonia Valles." She almost cried, almost let herself feel the full weight of what she'd just been given. Instead, she said, "Does this mean I get my own office?" "No, you're stuck sharing mine." Terrible negotiation. "Best I can do." They grinned at each other like idiots. Then Cairo's expression shifted. "There's something else." Antonia's stomach tightened. "What?" He stood, crossed to the window, looked out at the city. "The debt. Your father's debt. I know I should have told you before I paid it off. I know it was wrong to take that choice away from you." "Jin, let me finish." He turned to face her. "I'm not apologizing for paying it. I'd do it again. But I am apologizing for not trusting you enough to ask first. You deserve that respect." Antonia's throat tightened. "I forgave you for that weeks ago. I know, but I needed to say it anyway." He crossed back to her, close enough that she could see the vulnerability in his eyes. "You changed everything for me, Antonia. The way I work, the way I think, the way I let people in. Before you, I built walls. After you, I built partnerships. You're getting sentimental in your old age." "I'm 36. Ancient." Cairo grabbed her hand, pulled her to her feet. "I love you." The words hung in the air between them. Antonia's breath caught. "Say that again." "I love you." His voice was steady, certain. "I didn't plan on it. Didn't expect it. But it happened anyway. And I'm done pretending it didn't." Antonia looked at him, at the man who'd saved her when she was drowning, who'd fought for her when she couldn't fight for herself, who'd given her a future when she'd lost hope. "I love you too," she said quietly. Cairo's expression broke. Relief and joy and something deeper. He pulled her into his arms, kissed her like he'd been waiting his entire life for permission. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Antonia said, "This is still a terrible idea." "Probably." "We're going to fight, a lot." "Definitely. And if this goes wrong, we lose everything." "I know." Cairo's hands cupped her face. "But if it goes right, we build something no one else can touch." Antonia looked into his eyes and saw the truth there, the certainty, the commitment. "Okay," she said. "Okay. Let's build it." Cairo smiled, that rare, real smile that made her chest ache. Already started. Quotes. 6 months later, Antonia stood in the final room of Elevation, the empty one with just windows and sky. and watched the sunset paint Manhattan gold. The debt was gone. The investigation was closed. Marcus Lorne had been sentenced to 4 years in federal prison. Detective Hahn had sent a formal apology and a bottle of Korean whiskey. Elevation was thriving, and Antonia Valles, a woman who'd spent 14 months drowning in grief and debt, now owned 49% of the most exclusive experience in New York. She should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt quiet, settled, like she'd finally arrived at the place she was always meant to be. Cairo appeared beside her, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. Celebrating? Reflecting. He handed her a glass. What are you reflecting on? How close I came to walking away. She took a sip, the bubbles sharp on her tongue. If you'd asked me a year ago where I'd be now, I would have said buried, broken, barely surviving. And instead? Instead, I'm here, she looked at him. With you, building something that matters. Cairo's expression softened. You would have survived without me. Maybe. But I wouldn't have lived. She set down the glass, turned to face him fully. You gave me more than a job, Jin. You gave me permission to want something again, to believe I deserved more than just survival. You always deserved more. I didn't believe that until I met you. They stood there, the city burning beneath them, and Antonia felt the full weight of everything they'd survived. The debt, the investigation, the arrest, the fear. All of it had led here, to this moment, to this person, to this life. I have something for you, Cairo said suddenly. He pulled a small box from his pocket. Not a ring box. Something flatter. Leather. Antonia's heart kicked up. What is it? Open it. She did. Inside was a key. Matte black. No label. What's this for? A studio. Cairo's voice was quiet. In Brooklyn. Red Hook. 3,000 square feet. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Dance floor. Sound system. Everything you need. Antonia stared at this key. You bought me a studio? I bought you space to create. To move. To remember what it feels like to dance for yourself. He stepped closer. You've spent 2 years performing for everyone else, for your father, for survival, for elevation. I want you to have a place where you can just be. Antonia's vision blurred. Jin, you don't have to use it. You don't have to do anything with it, but it's there, waiting, for whenever you're ready. She looked down at the key, feeling something break open in her chest. No one had ever given her space before. Space to grieve. Space to heal. Space to become. Thank you, she whispered. Cairo pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. You don't have to thank me. Yes, I do. She wrapped her arms around him, holding tight. For all of it. For seeing me when I couldn't see myself. For believing I was worth the risk. You were always worth the risk. They stood there as the sun disappeared below the horizon, the city lights flickering on one by one, and Antonia thought about her father, about the last thing he'd said to her before he died. You don't owe me anything. Just promise me you'll live. She thought she was living, thought survival was enough, but she'd been wrong. Living wasn't just breathing, it was building, creating, letting people in even when it terrified you, choosing hope even when despair felt safer. Living was standing in an empty room with a man who'd saved her, knowing she'd saved him right back. I kept my promise, she said quietly. Cairo looked down at her. What promise? The one I made to my father. She met his eyes. I'm living. Really living. For the first time in years. Cairo's expression shifted. Understanding. Pride. Something deeper. He'd be proud of you. I hope so. I know so. He kissed her forehead. Because I'm proud of you. And I barely know what I'm doing half the time. Antonia laughed, the sound echoing in the empty space. We're a disaster. We're a partnership. Same thing. Probably. They grinned at each other, and Antonia felt something settle in her chest. Not certainty. Not perfection. Just peace. The kind that came from knowing you'd survived the worst and chosen to keep building anyway. Her phone buzzed. She pulled it out, expecting a vendor email or a client request. Instead, it was a text from an unknown number. A photo of her in Cairo, standing at this exact window, taken from outside. Right now. Antonia's blood went cold. She showed Cairo the screen. His expression went from peaceful to lethal in half a second. When did this come in? Just now. He pulled out his own phone, dialed read. We've got a problem. Someone's watching the elevation site. Telephoto lens, outside the building. Find them. He hung up, turned to Antonia. Let's go. Now. Jin, what's happening? I don't know yet, but I'm not taking chances. They moved toward the exit, Cairo's hand firm on her back, and Antonia felt the old fear rising. Then her phone buzzed again. Another message. Not a photo this time, just text. Congratulations on the launch. You've built something beautiful. It would be a shame if something happened to it. Antonia stopped walking. Jin. He looked at the message, his jaw tightening. Lorne's in prison. This isn't him. Then who? Before Cairo could answer, the lights went out. All of them. The entire floor plunged into darkness. Antonia's heart hammered. Jinnit! Stay close. His voice was calm, controlled, but she could hear the tension beneath it. Don't move unless I tell you to. They stood in the darkness, the city lights bleeding through the windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Then a voice came from somewhere in the room. Hello, Jin. A man, American accent, familiar somehow. The emergency lights flickered on, dim, red, just enough to see shapes. And there, standing near the entrance, was a man Antonia had never seen before. Mid-50s, expensive suit, silver hair, the kind of face that belonged in boardrooms and country clubs. Cairo's entire body went rigid. David. It's been a long time. The man, David, smiled. Too long. Antonia looked between them. Who is this? My former partner. Cairo's voice was ice. The one who taught me everything I know about building empires. And the one you betrayed, David said pleasantly. When you dissolved our partnership and took half my clients with you. Cairo's expression didn't change. You were running a Ponzi scheme. I walked away before it collapsed. You walked away with my business model, my contacts, my reputation. David's smile disappeared. And you've spent the last decade building an empire on my foundation. I built an empire on my own work. Did you? David pulled out a tablet, tapped the screen. Because from where I'm standing, everything you've done, every deal, every acquisition, every project follows the exact blueprint I created. You're not an innovator, Jin. You're a thief. Antonia stepped forward. Get out. David's eyes shifted to her. You must be Ms. Valez, the dancer, the debt case, the convenient hire. His smile was ugly. Did he tell you he got the idea from me? I used to recruit desperate people too. Easy to control, easy to manipulate. I'm not controlled by anyone, Antonia said coldly. No? Then why are you here? David gestured around the room. Why are you partnered with a man who built his fortune on stolen ideas? Why are you defending someone who's just as dirty as the people trying to destroy him? Because he's not dirty. Antonia's voice was steel. And you're lying. Am I? David pulled up files on the tablet, contracts, emails, business plans. These are from 12 years ago. When Jin and I were partners, every strategy he's used since then originated from our work together, work that legally belonged to both of us. Work he stole when he walked away. Cairo's hands clenched into fists. I didn't steal anything. I dissolved a partnership with a criminal. You dissolved a partnership and took everything we'd built. David's voice was quiet, dangerous. And now I'm here to collect what you owe me. I don't owe you anything. You owe me 10 years of profits, every dollar you've made, every client you've stolen, every project you've launched. David stepped closer. Starting with elevation. Antonia's stomach dropped. You can't. I can. David pulled out another document. I filed a lawsuit 3 days ago, claiming intellectual property theft, claiming that Elevation's entire concept was derived from work Jin and I did together. If I win, I own 50% of everything, including your equity, Ms. Velez. Antonia felt the ground shift beneath her. That's insane. That's business. David looked at Cairo. You have two choices. Settle with me. Give me what I'm owed, or fight me in court and watch everything you've built get frozen for the next 5 years while we litigate. Cairo's expression was carved from stone. I'll fight. Then you'll lose. David smiled. Because unlike Marcus Lorne, I have real evidence, real proof that you stole from me. And when the courts see it, they'll side with me every time. He turned and walked toward the exit, pausing at the door. You have 72 hours to make a decision, Jin. After that, the lawsuit goes public. And your reputation, what's left of it, gets destroyed. Again. Then he was gone. The lights came back on, and Antonia stood in the middle of the room, feeling like the floor had just collapsed beneath her. Cairo pulled out his phone, dialed Reed. We've got a bigger problem than we thought. Quok. The next 72 hours were a nightmare. Cairo's legal team dissected David's claims, looking for weaknesses. They found some: statutes of limitations, questions about intellectual property ownership, procedural errors in the lawsuit filing, but not enough. David had been meticulous. He'd kept records of every conversation, every meeting, every brainstorming session from their partnership. And while most business ideas weren't legally protectable, he'd managed to frame the case in a way that made Cairo look like he'd systematically stolen proprietary strategies. How bad is it? Antonia asked on the second day, sitting across from Cairo in his office. Bad. He looked exhausted, hollowed out. Even if we win, the lawsuit ties up Elevation for years. Investors get nervous, members cancel, the whole thing collapses. And if we settle? Then David gets half of everything, and he'll use it to launch competing projects. He'll destroy us from the inside. Antonia leaned back, staring at the ceiling. So we're screwed either way, unless we can prove he's lying. Can we? Cairo was quiet for a long time. Then he said, there might be a way. Okay. The plan was dangerous. Cairo reached out to David directly, offered to meet, discuss settlement terms. No lawyers, no recording devices, just two former partners trying to find resolution. David agreed. They met in a private room at a restaurant in Midtown, the kind of place where deals got made and secrets got buried. Antonia wanted to go, but Cairo refused. Too risky. If David suspected anything, the whole plan collapsed. So she waited in the loft with Reed and Yuna, watching the clock, trying not to imagine everything that could go wrong. 2 hours later, Cairo walked in. His expression was unreadable. Well? Reed asked. Cairo pulled out his phone, played an audio file. David's voice filled the room. You want to know the truth, Jen? The lawsuit is bullshit. Half those documents are fabricated. I don't have a real claim to Elevation, but I don't need one. I just need to create enough doubt that your investors panic. Once they pull out, you're finished, and I buy your company for pennies on the dollar. Cairo's voice, calm and steady. So this is extortion. David laughing. This is revenge. You destroyed my life. Now I'm destroying yours. Fair trade. The recording ended. Antonia stared at the phone. You got him. I got him. Cairo looked at Reed. Send this to my lawyer. And to the judge handling the lawsuit. David just admitted to filing a fraudulent claim. Reed grinned. He's going to prison. He's going to prison, Cairo agreed. Wows. The lawsuit was dismissed 3 days later. David was arrested for fraud, perjury, and attempted extortion. The evidence was overwhelming. He'd fabricated documents, lied to the court, and attempted to blackmail a former partner. The charges carried a minimum sentence of 7 years. Elevation's reputation not only survived, it thrived. The story became legend. The company that had weathered 2 attacks in 6 months and come out stronger, memberships doubled. Cairo Holdings expanded into 4 new markets, and Antonia Velez became the most respected creative director in the industry. But none of that mattered as much as the moment 3 weeks later when she stood in her new studio in Red Hook, sunlight streaming through the windows, and put on her dance shoes for the first time in 2 years. She didn't have music, didn't have an audience, didn't have a reason except that she wanted to. She moved slowly at first, testing her body, remembering what it felt like to move without purpose, without performance, without survival. Just movement, just breath, just being. And for the first time since her father died, Antonia felt free. Mashi. Cairo found her there an hour later, sitting on the floor, sweating and exhausted and smiling. "How does it feel?" he asked. "Like coming home." She looked up at him. "Thank you. For this. For all of it." He sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "You did the hard part. I just gave you space to do it." "You gave me more than space." Antonia rested her head on his shoulder. "You gave me a future. We gave each other a future." They sat there in the empty studio, the city humming outside, and Antonia thought about everything they'd survived. The debt, the investigations, the arrests, the lawsuits. All of it had been designed to break them. None of it had. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we keep building." Cairo took her hand, laced their fingers together. "We expand elevation. We launch new projects. We prove that good work survives bad people." "That's ambitious." "That's us." Antonia smiled. "Yeah, it is." Her phone buzzed one last time. She almost didn't check it, but something made her look. A message from an unknown number. No photo this time, just text. "You won. Congratulations. But remember, someone's always watching, always waiting. The game never really ends." Antonia stared at the message, her chest tightening. Then she deleted it, turned off her phone, and chose to believe that some battles, once won, stayed won. She looked at Cairo. "I'm done being afraid." "Good." He pulled her to her feet. "Because we've got work to do." They walked out of the studio together, hand in hand, and Antonia realized something fundamental had shifted. She wasn't running anymore, wasn't surviving. She was living, building, choosing hope over fear, partnership over isolation, creation over destruction. And maybe that was the point all along, not to escape the fight, but to become someone strong enough to win it. The city stretched out before them, infinite and unforgiving and full of possibility. And Antonia Velez, a woman who'd once been drowning, now stood on solid ground, ready to build something that would last. Together.